In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Amen. Adam mounted a beautiful horse in the garden, and he says he went to the extreme end of the park or the garden. We know from a text that this place is actually not very far from Niagara Falls. And he rides to the end of the boundary of the sacred garden. And there, as he tells us, he finds peace. He finds quiet. He finds tranquility. He looks out over a field and he sees animals grazing, all kinds, lions, tigers, bears, vultures, feasting on grass. And he tells us that at last he has found calm. And you ask, what has he found? From calm from what? And he tells us, from her. She's talking to me too much. And he said, at last she's found one of the animals that can actually talk back to her. They have conversation. And I've got rest. She discovered the snake. And he looks out over the field and he enjoys the vista. I'm paraphrasing from you a few paragraphs from The Diary of Adam and Eve by Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens. It's an interesting text. I heard it on the radio as I drove once. It was funny when I remember this some 20 years ago. Last night, in preparation to visit with you and our guests who are visiting with us, I looked at it again. I actually found those paragraphs that I just mentioned to you. But I didn't see them quite as funny. What I saw is they're more bitter than I remember, and angry, and of course, misogynistic. The Diary of Adam and Eve was published in the year 1906, towards the end of Mark Twain's career. So you could expect that this could come from a man who's looking at his entire life, who's now famous, born in poverty in Missouri, but now living quite well in Hartford, Connecticut, and making fun of upstate New York. And then he says it happened. He looked out over the animals, and they began a sound that he had never heard before. And suddenly he realized they were tearing themselves apart. He says, I had to make a dash. A tiger took my horse and would have taken me had I not moved faster. And as he's running, he said, oh no, it's happened. She ate the fruit. And as it were, the garden begins to collapse and fall apart. They rejoin each other. Adam and Eve come together, and as he tells us, they make it out of the garden. He tells us they go to Tonawanda. Clearly, the author does not like upstate New York very well. He also mentions Buffalo, not in a good light. And then at that moment, as they present to each other, they come to one another wearing leaves, and he mocks her for the leaves and the fashion of the leaves. And then at that moment starts the pivot in the story. Adam begins to actually see his wife differently. He sees Eve now as somebody not that he was trying to get away from and run away from, who was speaking too much. But he says now in the text with tenderness, I now come to depend upon her, and I need her all the more. And our conversation is now sweet. Something that Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, has left out of the story, in the misogyny and the bitterness, and also in the humor. He's left out another party. In Paradise, there is a third voice. It's actually a triple dialogue. It's the man, then the woman, but always there was the God. The Logos is actually in conversation with humanity. And that conversation is not broken by the tearing apart of the animals and the ruin of paradise, the transgression. No, actually that conversation, as is marvelously stated in St. Basil's anaphora, that God actually sustains that conversation through prophets, judges, great workers of miracles, until finally the day comes and finally giving back to creation his own Son. Because it is the Logos that's speaking in the garden. It's the Logos that says to the couple, "Where are you? Who told you that you're naked? What has happened to you?" That conversation, that sacred conversation, will continue. And it's reaching its apex for us right here this morning. On the last day before Great Lent, we reach a high point where we invite that conversation back into our life. That bitterness, however, in 1906, will also reach a crescendo, not in America, but in Europe. In 1929, Sigmund Freud will write one of his great works. It's translated in English as Civilization and Its Discontents. This is the follow-on to one of his other works, The Future of an Illusion, where he blames religion for the world's problems and performs one of his wonderful psychoanalyses on religion and finds it wanting and lacking badly. And in this interesting, seminal text, Civilization and Its Discontents, he offers the thesis that actually there's something inside of us. It's something that makes us want to kill. It makes us want to destroy. In other words, it makes us want to take the fruit and believe the serpent. He calls this thing the Thanatos principle, deriving from the Greek, the death wish, the death principle. And he leaves it at that. Both of these authors, Freud, the consummate atheist, Mark Twain, the inveterate misogynist and bitter old man, they're carrying forth in their works a Protestant error. I'd like to reveal it for you today. And it's this, that the image and the likeness of God, the image established in creation and the likeness of God, the imago Dei and the similitudo Dei in Latin, the similarity to God, is intact, but it's distinct. And in Orthodox Christianity, the intactness but the distinction always remains. The likeness is damaged by sin, but the image is undamageable. That's not true in Reformed teaching. It is argued, in fact, that there's no distinction between the two. The two are bounded and fused together. And when the likeness fails, with it comes down the image. There's a destruction, partial destruction of the image. Sin is so powerful in Reformed thought, it can even break this image down. And therefore the need in Protestant thought for grace to come in and do a massive repair job, an unbelievable repair job. That's actually not our teaching. The restoration of the likeness is the spiritual life, which we're now about to really, really take to its high point in Lent. The image, thank God in his goodness, because it is of God, can't be destroyed. And that's our hope. That's what keeps us from defaulting to the Thanatos principle, to courting atheism. That's what keeps us away from becoming bitter old women and bitter old men, because we can trust that God's image in us is actually of God himself. And it's unbreakable. And it's certified and made permanent in our baptism, confirmed in the chrismation, renewed, reestablished in Holy Communion, refreshed through confession of sins. And in this way, the divine conversation, which was always in the garden, is ours again. May it be that way for us in the next 48 days. May we cease bitterness. May we cease anger. May we come into the conversation with our hearts open. Like Adam in his diary, I've come to see her as that on which I depend. For us, in our diary, no fiction here. I come to see the living God, on whom everything depends.